Now, as Britain dithers and delays its exit from the European Union, a new generation of leaders is taking over in Brussels and Frankfurt, as Michael alluded there. A new president of the European Commission, a new president of the European Council, a new boss of the European Central Bank, and, a cynic might add, the same old Franco-German stitch-up when it comes to the top jobs. There are those in Brussels who are not entirely distraught to see the back of Britain because we've always been a drag on their federalist ambitions. The EU's new leaders are very much in the federalist tradition, and they won't have Britain as an excuse if they can't move Europe further in that direction. So what are the chances? Here's French journalist and broadcaster Benedicte Paviot with her take of the week.
Vive l'Europe! There's a new team moving in at the top, and once again, the bloc can move forward with purpose and vision. The nominated Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, is a committed federalist and a member of Angela Merkel's government. She has strong ideas about the future shape of the European Union and is well able to step up and take on the populist forces of Brexit and Trump. Oh, and well done to the EU for aiming for gender parity on the top 4 jobs. Nigel Farage and his brand new Brexit Party MEPs might be turning their backs on the European Parliament, but surely if they want a grandstand, they should do so in Westminster. Ah, wait, they don't have any MPs. Truth is, in the recent EU elections, Brexit did not act as a lightning rod for populism in the way that some predicted. Yes, the illiberal parties didn't do badly, but ultimately they did not achieve much of an advance on what they got in 2014. And while you in the UK have been continuing to squabble amongst yourselves over Brexit, you might not have noticed that the EU has signed up to 2 trade deals. The most significant is with the South American economic bloc Mercosur. It is the EU's biggest deal to date and creates a market for goods and services covering nearly 800 million people. Britain, take note, that deal was some 20 years in the making. So the EU is moving onwards and upwards. It's a shame we have to say au revoir to the UK, which has never had a real discussion about the benefits of EU membership. But so be it. Brexit has taken too much of everyone's time and energy already, and there is not much enthusiasm for renegotiation. But be in no doubt, the EU will not just survive, it will thrive without the UK.
And welcome back, Benedicte, who is France 24's UK correspondent and president of the Foreign Press Association. We're humbled to have you here with these titles. So you should be able to help me here, because in the past couple of years, we've had the Brexit revolt in this country, right-wing nationalists taking over Eastern Europe, Madame Le Pen coming first in France in the European elections, and a populist government in Rome. So the EU's response is to appoint a federalist to the Commission, a federalist to the Council, and the high priestess of globalism to the Central Bank. How is that meant to help?
Well, there are so many questions contained in what could appear to be one question. Andrew, why don't I respond to the one about President Macron and Marine Le Pen? So
no, I'd rather take it all together and ask how, in what way, given all these developments in Britain, France, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and so on, Italy, In what way are these appointments meant to address what's happening in these countries?
Well, first thing to say is that elected leaders of the different EU countries obviously found it quite hard. But what we forget is that there were 3 summits before Jean-Claude Juncker was actually appointed. So, as President Macron himself said, it is somewhat worrying and not a good sign that it did take this much time.
But that's the process. What I'm trying to point out
is... but it's referring to the people and the individuals as well.
But Europe clearly has troubles. It clearly has issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, it does.
But this would just seem to be business as usual. It's the same old same. It's like, are they the new Bourbons? I mean, they've learned nothing and they've forgotten nothing?
No, I think that certainly, again, let me refer particularly to President Macron. I think that it would be crazy not to acknowledge that there are things that deeply need reform. There is clearly a fragmentation, obviously, anybody can see that, across the EU. But what is interesting is that, on the one hand, you do get people who want more nationalism, who are worried, genuinely worried about whether it's immigration and their borders, and who have a very different vision of their countries and of where they sit geographically, geopolitically and strategically in a very turbulent world. And then you get some other leaders, like, indeed, the mandate that President Macron, the most pro-EU presidential candidate in living memory, who has this vision for the EU, and clearly it is not one that everybody shares.
No, that bit I got. I was just trying to work out how these appointments address it. Michael?
Well, I thought Benedicte's piece dripped with disdain and contempt for democracy. Her mocking of the Brexit Party, which did win the European elections, which is the largest party in the European Parliament, which has every right to turn its back when the anthem is played of an entity that claims national status, that wants to be United States.
You thought they were right to turn their backs?
Well, yes, because...
Wasn't that a bit childish?
No, I don't think it was, actually. The president of the session said that you listened with respect to the anthem of another country. That's perfectly true. But this is not the anthem of another country. This is the anthem of a country that many of the people in that auditorium want to bring about. They want to bring about a United States of Europe. And we are fundamentally opposed to it. And the reason we're fundamentally opposed to it is because it cannot be democratic. And Benedicte lightly used the word appointed for the new president of the Commission. That is the whole point. Appointed, not elected. The thing that you are creating is not democratic.
All right.
Indeed, in your own words, you betrayed that it's not only not democratic, it is anti-democratic.
Let Benedicte respond to that, then I'll come to Caroline.
Well, your opening remark, it would be difficult maybe to characterise it as being more emotionally loaded, Michael.
It's a bit like that.
Portillo. Not when you were Defence Minister, we said Portillo then. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, I don't think there was any disdain. I think what is very sad in this country, and I've been here since I was 2 years old, and I am half British, is the vitriol, and I'm not suggesting that that's what you were doing, but the vitriol that I'm not going to say one, is witnessing in this country. The country that gave debate...
I understand. That's not what our subject's about. I'm trying to get to how you are confident that these new appointments are a fresh start for Europe, and that's what makes you optimistic. Do you agree or disagree with that, Caroline?
I think what we've seen is pretty much same old, same old. It's the same French-German axis that operates. I'm quite surprised that out of the 5 top positions, not one went to one of the countries from Eastern Europe, for example. That might have been a measure of looking at the diversity across the 28 member
there has
states.
Been criticism of that,
and I think that, again, was misjudged. Of course, I'm very pleased to see 2 women up there, but it's also about what they're going to do. And I think the problem is that, you know, I don't want to see the European Union or any of the countries in it diminish as we leave the European Union. I want us to have a strong partnership. But it does seem to me that part of the problem is the European Union does have to face up to the problems on its own back, and it's on its own doorstep. Brexit has had an impact, will have an impact. There's no doubt about that. We're all grappling with that. But it's also clear that there's a budget has to be set, from 2021. That's not going to be easy. And then on top of that, putting aside people who have joined very sort of, if you like, right-wing nationalist parties, and they have expressed their voices in the European elections, there's also, I think, across the European Union, more apathy than some of the people, the elites of the organisations really understand, and mistrust and lack of understanding about what the European Union is meant to do. And I say that this as a friend. You must listen to those voices,
So how does
because
this help?
you will end up with situations that we found ourselves in the UK.
I agree, and it would be crazy for leaders not to recognise that there is a disconnect, there's an apathy.
So how do these appointments address that?
Clearly have been decided upon by the leaders.
No, we
because
know
yes,
that, but why
they've
do
been,
they
they will
address
be
it?
elected, by the way, because they'll have to be approved. So the fact of the matter is that these elected leaders have decided... Sorry, don't quite get what's so funny, but anyway, these
Because
elected...
they're not elected.
No, I'm talking about President Macron, the EU 28 leaders. So the EU appointed leaders have clearly felt that these people were the best, you know, with their backgrounds, with their visions. And of course they have to respect a certain split and certain
Right.
reflection. I agree with the criticism that has been made in the last 24 to 48 hours about the fact that nobody from Eastern Europe, that is
Right.
obviously...
But we have whether we're in or out of the EU, we have an interest in the EU succeeding.
Absolutely.
We have an interest in
Yes.
the EU prospering. It's whether we're in or out, it's our biggest market.
Indeed.
So I still don't understand why you think the EU is now in safer, even better, optimistic hands with a failed German defence minister, a failed Belgian prime minister, a former finance minister found guilty of negligence in a multi-million-pound euro scandal, and a Spanish politician who's been a cheerleader for repression in Catalonia. Why is Europe in good hands with people like that?
Well, that is an opinion, and certainly Ursula von der Leyen has been criticised.
She's the second most, in the Der Spiegel poll last month, she was the second most unpopular politician in Germany. Her department has been under investigation for corruption scandals and dodgy defence contracts. The Spanish politician, who is now the EU's foreign policy man, was done for insider trading. How can these people, how can Europe's future be safe in these people's hands?
I think that the important thing to remember is that the defence secretary that you are calling a failed German defence secretary...
Well, it's the Germans that call her that.
Well, not all Germans.
Most Germans do, including the Bundestag report on Germany's unpreparedness. 60% of their planes can't fly. 100% of their submarines can't take to the sea. They sent the German army into the Arctic NATO exercise with broomsticks for guns. That's the woman who's now president of the European Commission.
Wasn't she meant to replace Angela Merkel as well?
Yes, she was. And
that didn't...
a long time ago.
Okay.
And that
I mean, I'm
fell
just
out of
wondering,
favour.
your theme was an optimistic Europe, which we all need in or out. I don't understand your optimism with these appointments.
I think that, well, I don't agree with you completely that she is. I mean, these are very, salient examples of a broomstick instead of a gun. But then I suppose, very sadly, one could also remember about British soldiers in Afghanistan and elsewhere having to pay for their own boots. So I don't think one should point too many fingers about examples like that.
Look,
but
the
to address the bigger point...
drew comparisons between the ability of the British army and the German army, and they were not favourable to the German army. So that's
one can't compare the British army to the German army.
That's not
that is a non-starter.
This defence minister is also in favour of a European army.
No.
And she can't even get her own army to operate.
She's not in favour of a European army.
Oh, yes, she is.
No, hold on. She is in favour of... I'm glad it's creating so much mirth.
Well, you are sounding like a pantomime, the two of you.
Well, no, I don't. Well,
yes, you are.
I hope not, because we're trying to address what is
we're trying to have a
question.
proper debate.
Yes.
Well, you're not asking us any.
So let me hear from Benedict.
So the European armies, it's actually about a state of readiness, so that when there are interventions, as indeed in the same way that Britain supported France in its venture in Mali to help actually stop terrorism, Chinook. Well, if you think that you're...
Well, you're a mile off the subject.
Well, I'm trying to address the question that actually Andrew
how is Europe
asked
going
me.
to prosper? Let me say that I disagree with Andrew. I don't want Europe to prosper because the direction in which these people want to lead it is towards European federalism. I have enough feeling of my fellow Europeans to think that a federal state in Europe is not the answer, not only for us, but not for them. Something which is non-democratic is not the answer for Germany or for France or for Italy or for Greece. The Greeks already know it's not the answer for them because they've been ruined by the European Union, by the insistence on creating a euro for which they were totally unsuited. The euro being an entirely political project, because the European Union wanted to create the symbols of a single state. So they created a single currency, they created a flag, and they created an anthem, which is why it was right to show disrespect for it. Because these things are wrong things to do, because they take us in a non-democratic direction.
Disrespectful. It was,
and therefore, the appointment of people who have no sensitivity for the European population, I think in a way may be a good thing, because the revolt against this out-of-touch elite will continue.
Caroline?
Well, I'm glad we didn't join the euro. I think that was a good decision. But I do disagree with you on the antics, not only of the Brexit Party, but also the Liberal Democrats at the opening of the Parliament. I think both in their different ways
all right.
showed a lack of respect going on, and I don't think it was necessary at all.
Give me reasons to be optimistic about Europe now.
Look, it's very simple. It is absolutely crucial that leaders, whether it's in the United Kingdom or in continental Europe, since Britain is in Europe, in continental Europe, make a success. There are jobs depend on it, livelihoods depend on it. You have a house in France. You know, these are important things that we enjoy. Actually, in Europe, we take this so much for granted.
I know we want it. I'm asking you for reasons why we should
because
be
I
optimistic.
do believe that there are people who actually want to move forward, who don't want to create, who regret very much the departure of the United Kingdom, but who fundamentally respect the verdict of the British people. In a BBC documentary, Michel Barnier saying it again, President Macron saying it again and again. But we can't be sucked into, the European Union cannot be sucked into in the same way that the British Parliament has had the life drawn out of it by being sucked into the vortex of Brexit. Divorce needs to happen then, if that is the will of British people.
I wasn't asking about Brexit. I'm assuming that.
Well, I
wanted reasons to be
for
optimistic
jobs,
about Europe.
because I believe that President Macron is serious, that a dialogue has begun both within France and he has gone around, as has Angela Merkel. Of course, she'll be leaving. But it is fundamental that the European Union reconnect and finds a raison d'être that does resonate with its people.
Okay.
Peace depends on it, jobs depend on it.
Well, I agree with that
and we
last
must wish
point.
that.
All right, we shall leave it there, Benedicte
And
Paviot, thank you.
bonne chance with the renegotiation, because that's going to be a real tough ask.
Well, it may be news to you, but we're not actually doing the renegotiation.
Well, I think you should be involved, Andrew.